What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Watch It in Action. I'm BouseFeenux, and today we're going to be taking a look at Volt Prime. So, Volt Prime is one of the 3 starter Warframes you can pick at the beginning of the game, and he is touted as the Warframe to choose if you like a casting alternative to your Warframe gameplay. And this casting essentially comes in the form of electricity-based abilities. So, he's really cool. He's a lot of fun to play. He's pretty neat looking. He's got some decent utility as far as, survivability, defense, crowd control, stuff like that. I don't really play him very much as a DPS frame, or in general really that much at all. My main use for Volt right now is for the U18 speedrun, and I'm thinking about doing another video on that later, but for now, I've put together a little general play build that should pretty much carry you through and be pretty impressive in most of the mid to lower level content. Against higher level enemies, this build is going to fall off a little bit, but I'm going to show you some tactics that you can use to kind of make it viable even still. So let's take a look at the build we've got here real quick. Basically, these stats are pretty general. You'll notice that my power strength is maybe a little higher than yours if you're using the same exact build as me, and that's because I'm using the Arcane Storm Helmet, which increases your power strength. So if you're putting together this build and you're losing your mind and you're like, why is his power strength 10 higher than mine? It's because I'm using the Arcane Storm Helmet, so take that into account when you put this build together. But basically, I mean, this is pretty general. We've got 2 forma on, and the only reason I really put forma on this build is for my speedrun build here. You can take a look at that real quick if you want to. But essentially what we're doing here is, power strength. We've got a little bit of duration, a little bit of efficiency, a little bit of range, and all of these different stats kind of affect and are good for Volt to have in the positive. So let's take a look at his abilities real quick. Shock is basically a shocking projectile. It's like a chain lightning skill if you played World of Warcraft and you played a druid and you use chain lightning or anything like that. That's essentially what this skill is like. It's very cheap to cast. It links up to 5 enemies, and that increases with higher power strength. Does a little bit of damage. Has a pretty good power range up to 21 meters, but the real reason I use this is because it's guaranteed that you're gonna get an electrical proc, and electrical procs stun enemies. And even better, if an enemy is stunned, this is kind of an exploit you can pull off in the game. If an enemy is stunned by electricity, you can clip through them. You can move right through them as if they're not there. So this makes it really good if you're trying to, get through a really congested group of enemies, like maybe after you finish a capture or something like that, and there's a lot of enemies in the area. This is really good to throw on an enemy and get through them. Speed is pretty self-explanatory. Basically what this does, this is the key ability here that you want to build around for the speed run, and like I said, I'll eventually do another video on that at some point, but this is a key ability here. When you press it, it's a timed ability. It has a duration that ticks down. None of his abilities are toggled, by the way, but it has a duration that ticks down. It makes you really fast, gives you increased dexterity, so that means you can attack faster with melee weapons. And as I mentioned in the Valkyr video, this is the ability that you're going to want to use in conjunction with Warcry. Make you ultra fast at melee. It's pretty impressive. Electric Shield is going to be the ability that kind of carries us into the end game here, if you can even really say that with Volt. But what this ability does, it does a lot more than this description implies. Basically, the behind the scenes with this ability is you're going to get a 50% electricity damage increase with this. It's going to apply 50% extra electricity damage to your weapons. Also, you're going to get a 2x crit multiplier, which is really important, so I recommend using a crit-based weapon if you're going to be using this ability a lot. And up until update 17.4, this ability actually used to be even more useful. It used to increase the range of beam weapons up to 70 meters, which is extremely awesome for weapons like the Amprex. It basically turned the Amprex and the Phage into sniper rifles, which was amazing, and then they kind of changed it, and it made it not as good as it used to be. But that being said, it's still a useful ability. When you have this up, it doesn't have health. It's just a duration ability. So no matter how much damage it takes, it's going to stay up until that duration ticks down, which is really, really nice, and you can place these just about anywhere. Overload is kind of his ultimate ability here, and what this does is it's basically like Shock on steroids, and it takes a few seconds to cast, which is why we're using Natural Talent on this build, so we can cast it quickly. And what this does is it throws out electricity in a radius around him, and it just continues to travel at, kind of a slow pace almost, but it has this power duration, and you cannot recast this ability while the ability is still, in effect, while the electricity is still traveling over the ground. And what this does is it'll cause electronics like lights in the, if you're in the void and there's the lights on the wall and stuff like that, or in Corpus missions, it'll cause electronics to explode. This doesn't really do a whole lot of damage unless you have like super high power strength. One exploit that you can pair though, this is actually useful for Draco. If you're trying to level your weapons, this is one of the Draco setups that you can take along. You can spec Overload for max range and max power strength, and if you have a Banshee with you, Overload will actually trigger those sonar spots from Banshee, making this a pretty deadly combo. So basically Volt synergizes really well with a couple different other frames, with Valkyr, with, you know, with Banshee, stuff like that. So this is kind of a general build. This is going to let you, you know, crowd control enemies with that shock and that Overload. Those guaranteed electrical procs may save your life. And against lower level enemies, they're going to be pretty devastating. But Electric Shield is going to keep you alive, and Speed is going to keep you mobile, and it's going to be pretty impressive. It's almost like a, you know, like a discount or bastardized version of Warcry here. But let's take a look at how these abilities actually work. We're using the Soma Prime, which those of you that know is a very high crit based weapon, and we're going to just throw in some elite crewmen here. Why not? We'll use some level 90 elite crewmen. These are Corpus targets. Electricity is very good against Corpus targets and machine health. So if you're fighting MOAs, anything like that, it's going to be pretty good against them. So we're going to simulate. We're going to drop down here. I'm going to show you how these abilities work. So shock is going to, you know, stun these enemies, keep them in place for a second. That electricity proc is going to be pretty nice. We throw it on our Volt Shield. You'll notice that we're doing significantly more crit damage. You know, it's pretty much double what we were doing before. We were doing about 1,000 damage a shot. Now we're doing like 2,800. So this is going to help keep you alive a little bit. And like I said, you can kind of place it. You just aim where you want it to go and even create like a little shock igloo for yourself. Cool thing, this isn't like Frost's Bubble where you can only shoot from the outside in. You can actually shoot, or from the inside out, you can actually shoot from the outside in too. And it'll pass through. One thing to note though, a glitch that I've noticed is if you die while these shields are active, you cannot shoot back through them for some reason. I don't know if that's a glitch or I don't know if that's intentional or not, but you can't shoot back through them if you die. You just have to wait for them to go away or move to another location and put another shield down. But his other abilities here, Speed, like I said, it just makes you fast. With more power strength, this ability is really impressive, and like I said, it's the key ability for the speed run. So it's going to keep you mobile. It's going to let you get through those areas quickly without hopefully being hit. And then we have our last ability here, Overload. And that's going to, you know, travel over the ground. You can see it kind of traveling out here. I use Shock and Overload in conjunction with each other to stun enemies and then drop this Overload on them while they're stunned to do a little bit of extra damage for them. So you can kind of play around with those abilities. The big thing, you're going to want to make sure you have this shield up all the time. This is really good for, you know, mobile defense, something like that. Anything where you're standing in place for a long period of time, because you can just dish out that extra crit damage. And like I said, you know, a crit weapon with Volt is ideal. Not necessary, but, you know, it's going to make your life a little bit better, and it's going to give you an extra advantage to using that shield. But really, I mean, this is Volt. This is, you know, one of the starter frames in the game. He's got a massive energy pool. Not a lot of survivability. He's a little squishy, but he does have one of the higher shield capacities in the game at 1,100 with a max rank redirection. So, you know, throw him on, give him a try. Try this build out, modify it to your tastes. This is just a good starting point if you'd like to play Volt. Any one of his abilities can kind of be min-maxed for, but I try to make this build as like a general play so you can kind of get in and, you know, do a little bit of damage, have a little bit of crowd control, etc. But I hope you guys learned something from this video. I hope it was helpful for you, and I can't wait to see you at the next one. Thank you guys so much for watching.